And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to She's a Boss podcast. Today, we speak to Alison SABP. Alison, interestingly, is the Director of Middle East and North Africa for the British Council. So she works in education, essentially. Her career with the British Council has spanned continents over the years. She has always been an inspiration to me and to any woman out there who is quite busy juggling a career with a demanding job and kids and a family. And interestingly, Alison throws in moving countries into the mix. Her two lovely children recently graduated from university. They were born in Sri Lanka while she was working there, and they've grown up across the globe while Alison moves with her job. Welcome to She's a Boss podcast, Alison.
Thank you very much.
Alison, actually, I'm going to let you tell us about what you do now first to begin with.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that very nice introduction. I'm Director for teaching for the Middle East and North Africa for the British Council. The British Council is what we call a cultural relations organisation. We make friends for the United Kingdom. That's the simplest way of putting it. Through arts, education, and that's sort of what the organisation does. And our approach is very much based on mutuality. So a mutually beneficial relationship between the UK and the country that we're working in. So my role is I'm working as you said, in the Middle East and North Africa, and we have 17 countries in the Middle East and North Africa, and out of those 17 countries, 12 of them have teaching centres where we teach the English language, and that's basically it is a revenue generating part of our organisation. Part of our organisation is funded by the UK government, but this sector is basically, not basically, but it generates income. And so my job is really to look at the strategic focus of the teaching centres, to focus on the business development, looking forward over the next, 3 to 5 years, and where we can really invest our resources to develop our business and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our customers who are learning English with us. We offer English courses to students. We've just introduced early years, so that's little 3 to 5 year olds. We have a partnership with Ardman. So it's learning time with Sean and Timmy. You've got young kids, I'm sure you'll know them from Sean the Sheep. So right from 3 years old, so we have a whole section of young learner, what we call young learner classes, from early years right up to secondary. And then we also run a lot of adult classes. And at the moment, 3/5 of our courses are adult courses and 2/5 are young learners, but our young learner market is really growing. Wow. So that's my responsibility. I'm sure you're aware, Middle East and North Africa is a pretty wide region, spanning from Morocco, Tunisia and Libya and Algeria over in the west, right across the north, including Egypt, and then across to the Gulf countries. So our biggest country, in fact, the biggest country in the region for teaching of English and for a lot of our activity is Saudi Arabia, which sort of dominates the Gulf. And then we have a presence in all of the Gulf countries. Obviously, this region encompasses Libya, Yemen, Syria, countries where there's a lot of unrest, a lot of political and social unrest, but we don't actually have teaching centres in those countries at the moment.
Yeah, I think, Alison, in just the last 10 years that I've known you, at that time that when we first met in Kuala Lumpur all those years ago. Like I remember you moved from New Delhi to Kuala Lumpur, and then you moved to Lisbon, and then you moved to
Yeah.
Dubai. So this career of yours has also taken you to many different countries. Can you? I think we probably don't have enough time for you to tell us about each and every country, but
No, I'm sure we don't.
no, but it seems your career has spanned continents. Like, can you talk
Yes.
to us a little bit about the different countries and how
Yes.
the British Council has moved you all this way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started off working for the British Council. I've been working for the British Council most of my working life, actually. I started working for, not all, but most. I started working for the British Council as an English teacher, and that was a long time ago, 1988. So nearly 30 years I've been working for the same organisation as a teacher on a 2-year contract in Sri Lanka. Colombo, capital of Sri Lanka. And while I was in Sri Lanka, I met my husband and I got married and I had my 2 kids. So I actually stayed in Sri Lanka for 10 years. And from Colombo, I went up to the second city in Sri Lanka, Kandy, and I set up a teaching centre in the library, which we already had there. So that was, that was like 1/3 of my time with the British Council was in Sri Lanka in that period where I got married, I had young children, and that fits in quite well with teaching because you get holidays, and seemed that worked pretty well. And also in Asia, you do get quite a lot of. It's easier to get help at home with your kids. After that, we moved to Barcelona, and from Barcelona, we went to New Delhi in India. From there, we went to Malaysia. Then, as you said, from there to Lisbon, and now we're in our 5th year in Dubai. So this is my first job in the Middle East. Basically, my career has been really between South Asia or Southeast Asia and Europe. I studied modern languages. I studied French and Spanish at university. So, I guess I feel comfortable in those countries because it's easier to communicate. I haven't really picked very much up in the way of other languages as I've worked in other countries.
Wow. But why the British Council, Alison?
Well, I started off working with the British Council because previously to that, I had worked in Spain for a couple of private schools, and the British Council offered more security and a better environment to teach in. And I suppose I've been able to work my way up through the organisation, but I think it's an organisation where people are very passionate about their work. People are very committed. Although I work in, if you like, in the business side. I mean, the British Council itself is a charity. That's its status. So, and my focus now is obviously on running a business, but it's still basically that basic premise of what we're doing is, I think it's that mutuality aspect of our work, which is about, we work, and most of our staff are we employ from the countries that we're working in. So they have the wealth of knowledge and expertise of the countries, and what we're bringing, I think what UK staff who travel around bring to that, or indeed it's not just UK staff that travel around now, it's number of staff from different countries travel around. I think what we bring is the strategic focus and the impetus to change, because change is quite difficult, and obviously if you are it can happen that if you're working in an environment for a long time, that bringing in change may be more difficult if you're there for a long time, but not always. That's not always the case, of course. But anyway, that's basically the model, that there are senior managers basically who move around the globe, will work in a country for 3, 4, 5 years, and also return to the UK. Actually, I have never worked in the UK, but a lot of our senior managers would spend some time working in the UK as well, because in a lot of jobs, so for example, if you're a country director job, if you're working in a country and you're the country director, it's very important also to keep in mind, or to be aware of, and to have relationships with key UK stakeholders. So there may be people in the Foreign Office, people in UK government, all sorts of partners who can work with you. For example, in education, if you're working in education, then and you're looking at changing policies in a country and helping a ministry in a country to, for example, think about their teaching of English, looking at their teaching of English, then there may be some expertise which can be shared. That that's how we look at, as I said, it's all about mutuality. So one of our big projects in education is called Connecting Classrooms, and that's about connecting through the use of technology, children in UK schools connecting with students around the world, and furthering their understanding of what it's like to live in another country, and the whole sort of social and cultural aspects of that.
Well, I didn't realize that, because I always, in my knowledge of the British Council, it's always, in my very limited knowledge, it's always been sort of the English teaching guru in every country that I know where it exists. I didn't realize that there was actually a feedback loop. Like there was also the what was going on in the UK itself.
Oh no, that's a very important part of what we do.
Okay, tell us a little bit more about this Connecting Classrooms. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, well, that's basically as I described it. I mean, we have a lot of other projects in education as well. For example, school principals, visits from the UK to overseas back to the UK. Looking at, and that, I think that's one of the main things that the British Council tries to do, is to bring people together, to bring key decision makers together to share ideas and to move forward. And sometimes we're in a position to be able to do that, to bring together countries and key decision makers in countries, so perhaps in the area of education, or sometimes in the area of governance or science, to try to work on things together. And because we are doing that in a cultural way and not necessarily in a political way, that is often very helpful. So, and obviously bringing UK expertise and knowledge into that mix as well. I mean, so we have. Yeah.
Sorry. I think you said a very crucial thing there, bringing people together. And as far as I've known you, it's just in your personality as well to bring people together. So you're probably very well suited to your job, Alison.
Yeah, well, most of my work, you see, the thing is that my work is focused very much on teaching English. It has been, because as I said, I started off as a teacher, and I've kind of worked my way up through the ranks. But that's an important part of what we do. But also, I think the rest, the other work that we do is really important as well, and really interesting. We do some really innovative work in the arts as well. So where we would have artists, young artists. We don't usually work with sort of the big names and mainstream artists, because they have their own sort of mechanisms and their own structures in place. We would bring, groups of, perhaps, I don't know, some young musicians from the UK. We might bring them to the United Arab Emirates, and then they'll go and work in schools with young people who are interested in art, in music here. But then sometimes we do work with the big names. We've got we have a couple of, at the moment, we have a couple of what we call Year of Creative Collaborations taking place. And one of them is the UK and India, and the other one is the UK and the United Arab Emirates, where I am. So the collaboration, I think they've just had Anushka Shankar, who's very well known in India, has been working on a collaboration in India. She was commissioned to write some sitar music to some music to accompany an old Indian silent film, and that's been on that's just been on a tour around India. And then in the UAE, we've got I don't know if it's any really big names. I'm just trying to think, but we've got a whole stream of activities that
So
are
there's
going on
essentially
here.
a very, very arts, excuse me, arts and culture part,
Yeah,
which
very
none
much,
of us are not
exactly.
aware of. But
Exactly,
Alison, I'm
yeah.
going to break you away a little bit
Yeah,
from
sure.
from I think a lot of our listeners, especially the women, would be very keen to hear, because a lot of us live somewhere around here, and in the US or in Europe, and it's quite hard to imagine flying off somewhere else, what seems like a distance to us here, having kids, and then building your career. I mean, you started your career more or less in Sri Lanka. You've brought it to where it is, and to the position that you are. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you made that all work for you right from the onset, having young children, building your career there, and then moving them across the world?
Well, I suppose the first thing is it's about your relationship with your partner, isn't it? Your husband or your partner, because you have to both be signed up to that. It's not something you can do without support and agreement that this is the way that things are going to go forward. And in my case, my husband was he was willing to do that. He was willing to leave Sri Lanka after 10 years. He was willing to leave Sri Lanka and come, and as a family for us to go to Barcelona. And I was the person who was, I was the main breadwinner, basically. And he became a house husband. When we left Sri Lanka, he basically became responsible for everything. We didn't, in Sri Lanka, of course, well, not of course, but in Sri Lanka, we had quite a lot of help. We had a nanny, we had a gardener, we had driver, we had quite a lot of help.
As one does in Sri Lanka.
As one does, yeah. And my husband had, he had a full-time job, although he was pretty lucky. He had a boss who was very flexible. So he was already giving me quite a lot of support then. But when we moved to Barcelona, nothing. You can't afford. When you go, as you know, in Europe, very difficult to be able to afford any childcare, and we certainly were not in a position to do that. So he was doing all the cooking, shopping. I think we'd only been there for about I think we'd only just moved into our flat, our apartment, out of the hotel. We were in a hotel for about 2 weeks, and then we moved into our apartment, and then I had to go off to Greece, and IKEA were delivering the bunk beds, and my husband didn't speak a word of Spanish, and they didn't speak a word of English, and I was just flying off to Greece, and he had to sort it all out. So I think that's the first thing, is in terms of the support of, it's got to be a joint decision. I don't think it's really, it's not, I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have done it without the real full support of my husband. And basically, since we were in Barcelona, so when we went there, the children were 4 and 6. Until now, he has taken on that role of house husband, or I think he's promoted himself to CEO now of of the house. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, I guess, is, well, yes, I like variety in my work. I think if you're going to move to lots of different countries, then that you have to be comfortable with quite a lot of change and adaptation, and that has to be a stimulating factor for you. And for me, it is, because every 4 or 5 years, I have the continuity of working for the same organisation and knowing very well, what's expected of me and how the organisation works, and a network, albeit a global network of very dedicated colleagues who can support me, and I can work with them. But at the same time, going to live in a new country, find out about a new culture, all of that. All of that to me is very stimulating. And one of the things I've loved about this job is that I get to go to 12 different countries. So that's even more interesting, and 12 different environments as part of my job. So I think in terms of the children, obviously, I think we worry a lot about our children, and actually I think most children are pretty...
Oh, I echo your sentiments.
I think generally children are a lot more flexible than we give them credit for. Perhaps we project our worries onto them a bit. Generally, they are pretty they're pretty agile at adapting. My children certainly were. I think it's really important. I mean, I did always choose countries. I did always apply to countries where I knew that there would be good schooling for them, and always tried to stay in places for about 4 years, so that at least they have blocks of it. We weren't moving sort of every 2 years or something like that. And we didn't move at any key points in their education. So I think, you have to plan that a bit. You have to think about when exams are, and you have to, for example, when we were in India, when we were in Delhi, the only school which really had vacancies and was the American school. So they were following they were in an American environment, although they were doing an international course, the International Baccalaureate. So when we moved to Malaysia, when we moved to Kuala Lumpur, we took the decision to put them into another American school. Even though I'm British and promoting British education, we put them into another American school so that they would have the same sort of environment and the same feel. I think that worked quite well. However, when we moved from there to Lisbon, my daughter was already going to university, and my son we moved to there was only really one school, and we were a bit worried because it was more of a sort of British approach. But actually at 16, that suited him well, and it was the IB, and he absolutely loved it. So that we were lucky there. I mean, I think there's a stroke of luck with some of these sometimes as well, but if you sign up to this sort of life where you move around quite a lot, then you have to have some sort of ultimate belief that things are going to work out for the best, and you do everything you can, but some things are beyond your control.
Oh, and things just somehow or rather fall into place usually.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think what you've said here, Alison, like having the support of your partner, looking forward to the variety and excitement that comes from each move. And I think adding on to the fact that children are actually quite resilient, a lot of our listeners are going to feel so much better about their own jobs and what they do with their careers, listening to you, knowing that your children are now, very successful in their young years.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the thing about children is that it changes. I think, the support that you give to them. One of our mutual friends, Anima, she put a very good post up recently on Facebook about teenagers, because, you think that all the real hard work of looking after your children is when they're so dependent on you, when they're, I mean, the sort of age that yours are really, Sham, now, they're young and they need their parents all the time. But when they become teenagers, and the article that Anima put up, it's about being a pot plant parent, which I thought
Mm.
was really good. And that sort of thing of your presence is required. They need you to be around. They need that feeling of support, but they don't want you asking them any questions or saying anything or interrupting. You know, everything you do embarrasses them and is boring, and you don't know anything about anything. But actually, they really appreciate you being around, and sometimes that. You know, that can be as challenging as when they're little, and they require you to be around for really very practical reasons, just to
And
do
answer the
things for them.
5,000 questions that they have every day.
Exactly. So it changes all of the time, and I guess you do have to be aware of that. And of course, some children do in the end find that moving all the time is not what they want to do anymore.
Mm.
And in the British Council, there is, when you're at a senior manager level, there is the possibility for children to go to boarding school and to
Right.
go, and that's what happened to some of my colleagues. You know, their children have actually said, "Listen, I've had enough now. You know, and now I want to." I'm quite happy to go. I would like to go to boarding school, and I think, you know, if that's an option, then if that's what the child decides at that age when they're ready for it, then that might be an option that some people have to take. I myself went to boarding school, so I think that works for some children as well as for other children, which was fine for my two kids. They were happy in all of their schools, and they were happy moving around. That that they could be with us for the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I know your two kids, they're amazing. So you've obviously done something right there.
Yeah, strangely enough, though, they're both in England now after having
Yeah.
trekked around the world, and they went to university in the UK, and they've both stayed on there. My daughter, for now, I'm sure she'll end up in different countries, but my son is very at home there. So, you know, you don't really know how your children's lives are going to pan out afterwards.
Mm-hmm. It's quite fascinating to see the fact that they are now both in the UK together.
Yeah, yeah.
It's lovely. I mean, and I suppose it's been very exciting for you to have your partner follow around and also build different networks wherever he goes with you also.
Yeah,
And this I say because I know you both personally,
yeah.
and it's I want to bring it back to yourself. Like, you've got your
Mm.
job where you're investing in whenever you're in a different country or different region every 4 or 5 years, and then you've got the children who, you know, there are a lot of work to settle them into a new country and then
Mm.
get it going. And what do you do for yourself in making new friends in new places? So I met you through a book club in
You
Kuala
did.
Lumpur, where it was more like a food club, but still, given the Malaysian context.
Yeah.
So how do you nurture relationships and friendships with
Yeah,
this moving every 4 or 5 years?
it is quite difficult. It is quite difficult if you're working full time, and if your partner is the one who's involved in everything to do with school. I think when you've got children with you, often the way that you make friends is through your children. So through through meeting people at the school gate, or through getting involved in volunteering to help out in various aspects of school. My husband has always done a lot of voluntary work in terms of the sports, the sports activities that are part of school life. And he's always made his own network of contacts and friends through that, his support network through sports and working on sports with the kids. For me, that was much more difficult, and it was when I was in Delhi. So when the children, I think when the children are very young, you're just so busy. I don't know. When they were very young, we were just so busy all of the time anyway. And I guess in Barcelona, I made a couple of friends at work. And that was enough, really. But when I went to Delhi, and the children start to get a bit older, and they don't actually want you around all the time, and they have doing various things with their own friends. Then, it was a friend of mine who I'd actually known at university who happened to be working in Delhi as well, and she was part of this book club. And I said, "Oh, that sounds really good. I'd really like to come." And I started going to the book club, and it was great because it was just, nothing to do with work, or it was completely different set of people, women. It was women in India. And I really enjoyed it because I like reading, and I liked talking about books, and then, having a glass of wine and having a chat. And also it's a very helpful network to find out, different experiences. I mean, some of the women were married to Indians, some of them were Indians. It was quite a diverse group, and it really helped me feel that I had, a sort of a support network that was just about, that was nothing to do with my work, nothing to do with my kids, that was just, just a group of people that I could spend time with. So when I went to Malaysia, I joined, I found out about the book club through Sharon, and that's how I got involved in it. And you know what our book club in Malaysia was like, and then the same thing in Lisbon. Unfortunately, here in Dubai, because I travel so much, because I think we know that one of the things about a book club is you need to be committed, you need to turn up, every
You need
month.
to have read the book. We all know
You need to have read the book. Yeah, you can't constantly, A, not have read the book, or B, not turn up. I mean, every now and then you might, but you have to just at least make that commitment to read a book a month, and to turn up once a month. And that has actually been practically impossible for me here because I'm traveling so much. And there's always things happening. So I haven't been able to do that here, which I have been quite sad about. But that's because I'm on the road so much. So it's been more difficult here. But the great thing about Dubai is that, which is that we get a lot of our friends, our global network of friends. We don't have such a local network of friends in the UAE, but there are always people coming through Dubai. So whether they're my husband's friends from Sri Lanka, or friends of mine from British Council, or friends, there are just always people coming through. We do have some very good friends here. In fact, our friends that we have here are people that we met on previous some friends
previous
who were here,
postings or something.
previous postings. Yeah.
I mean,
So
well, as I said, I've known you through this book club and friendships,
yeah,
and it spanned many books since we first met.
exactly.
Alison,
So
with all the moving and building your career and moving it up as you have now, can you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen as a success or successes? And in that same breath, then tell us what you feel has been a failure or
yeah.
a challenge. I think a lot of us are not at that stage of the career as you are. So
Yeah, I think for me, the successes in my workplace are, actually, like you said, bringing people together, getting the best out of teams, and getting teams to work together. And I think that's my strength as a leader in the workplace, is to really build up a team, a balanced team, to make it clear to everybody in the team the direction that we're heading in, and what each individual in that team, what their responsibilities and accountabilities are on that journey, and also the team responsibility. So a sense of being an individual and contributing, but nonetheless within a team. And my challenge in taking up this job in across a region is that obviously I don't have a team that reports to me in the same way. Each of the individuals who I'm working with is based in a country, and they are reporting within their country. But nonetheless, I've worked really hard to build up that team feeling across the 12 countries. and to get each of the teaching centre managers to understand, what they need to do in their role, but how they are part of a team. So in order to do that, I go to the country, I meet them, I see their individual circumstances, I meet their country director and who would be their boss, understand exactly where they're coming from. And then at the same time as setting the sort of the strategy and the direction for everybody who's working in the teaching centres and where the objectives are. And so if one teaching centre for some reason isn't doing very well, then we'll ask another teaching centre in another country to really try hard that year to get in a few more students to make up for whatever's happening in the other country. And I think there is that sense of a team even across 12 countries. So I think that's my strength.
It sounds amazing.
Well, it's hard work and it doesn't always work. And you think you've got the perfect team, then someone moves on and a new person comes, and you just assume that they'll carry on doing what everyone's doing, and of course they don't. And you have to, it never stops because there's constantly people changing and different priorities in country. But it's that's what I enjoy. I think failures. I was thinking about this before because you did send me some sort of questions to think about. I think I don't really think of failures. I think about lessons learned. I think we have to take that approach because, as when you listen to, if you've had any coaching or if you listen to people talking about coaching, that's what coaching is all about, really, isn't it? It's about learning from everything that you do.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I would say the biggest lesson that I've learned, I think there's two things. One, in terms of my work, is that I'm a very vocal person. I challenge a lot of the time, and I'm not. I'm very assertive, and perhaps in the past I would come across as very aggressive. I think now, as time has gone on, that I've learned to think a bit more about what I want to achieve through the challenge and the best way to challenge. I think the reason I challenge is because I can see things from lots of different perspectives, and I want to have that discourse around, all the different angles, but not everybody takes it in that vein. But there are ways and ways of challenging, and I've realized that it's very important to think about what is the end result, why are you doing this, what do you want to achieve, and what's the best way to do that. And actually that can make you more assertive because you actually are you think, no, I am going to challenge this, and this is where I want to take it. And perhaps you leave behind some of the things which perhaps aren't so important anyway. Mm-hmm. So you focus on it because it takes a lot of energy out of you.
Yeah, a lot of effort. Yeah,
to keep challenging things all the time. So I think that's what I've learned in terms of don't just focus your challenges and your areas that you want to bring about change. Right. In a personal side, I think I'd learned a big lesson when we moved to Barcelona, to Spain, and that was that you do have to keep, you have to balance, you have to have balance, you have to keep putting effort and nurturing your family life, your marriage or your partnership as much as you do your work. So it sounds obvious when you say it, but
we just tend to take it for granted when we're moving along.
You tend to take it for granted. Yeah, exactly. You tend to think, oh, I've found the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, and I've got these lovely children, and so but it doesn't work like that. You have to keep the balance, because otherwise some of the balls will fall out of the air. And I think I really learned that in Barcelona, where I was was a big change for me. It was a new job, it was a promotion, and I was really working all out and not thinking enough about the family and my husband. So I
It's
think,
a
yeah, that was a
constant
good
learning
lesson.
process.
It's a
Yeah,
constant learning process, yeah. So to make time and
yeah. I
to
mean,
give the time to it.
you've made me very thoughtful, Alison, as I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be. It almost makes my next question obsolete, which is, what advice would you give to us listening in?
Yeah, I think that's key, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
keep the balance, and don't take your family life for granted. Don't take any of it. Don't take that. It's a question of priorities as well, isn't it? And probably, I don't know, for most women who decide to work and have children, I mean, some women decide to work and not to have children, and that's their choice to make. But if you decide that you want to have a family and you're working, then then I think you've got to you have to find that balance, because otherwise, and there may be times when your work will take second place, and you may decide to move away from them. With that, what I was saying earlier about the pot plant parent, I have noticed that quite a lot of women in sort of CEO positions, or when you hear these women stepping down, it's actually not when they've got young babies. It's actually when they've got teenagers, because they find that the teenagers need them in a way that they just hadn't really reckoned on, or they hadn't sort of. So I think it's just keeping track of that throughout
Yeah.
your career, but also your partner and the time. You do need some time with just you and your partner, as well as time with the whole family, and you need to factor that in.
I think right after this interview, I'm going to go out and give my husband a big hug. Listen, Alison, thank you so, so much. I feel like I could run another interview session just talking about juggling a career and family and all of that with you. You've given us so much to think about. If anyone is interested to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
They could send me an email.
I'll write your email address down for them in the show notes. So
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they can just send me an email, and yeah, I'd be interested to hear from other women, and how
yeah.
what they're doing and what their issues are.
Alison, it's been an honor speaking to you. I've valued our friendship from the time that you first met. Yes, you've always been very forthright and a very strong
Yes.
personality, and it's been such a delight. Also because we spent so much time talking about food and everything else. I've hardly had a chance to actually get to know Alison from the career side, and this is
Yeah,
a
but that's
wonderful
good.
opportunity. It's and
Yeah, that was, as I said, that was a deliberate policy, so it worked. So that's good, because I wanted something that was out of the workplace in the book clubs. So yeah, it's good.
great. Thank you so much for your time,
Okay,
and it's
thank
been
you.
really wonderful speaking to you again. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.